Best teachers पढ़ाए तो simple लगे everything. Leaderboards and quizzes से
Amazing.
learning हो जाए happening. समझ आएगा तो मजा आएगा.
Vedantu. Learn live online. To attend a free live class, download the app now.
Hey students, good evening, namaste and welcome to part 3 of our class 10 ICSE Biology Specimen paper, the latest one for your board exams aimed at your 2020 March board exams. I'm Ambika, Master Teacher of Biology at Vedantu. I hope your preparations are all going amazingly great. I hope your confidence is right there at the topmost level. There's no reason to be worried or anxious about exams. Just in case you do have any kind of exam-related stress or any kind of anxiety issues, do feel free to send me an email. Or yes, I have already been making a lot of motivational videos for you on a platform called the Students Corner, which you can just search for on this very channel, Vedantu 9 and 10. And in case you don't find exactly what you need to, feel free to write to me, okay? So as always, let's get started with a positive quote. And yes, this is what I have to tell you today. Think positive and positive things will happen to you. Of course, it seems very, very fancy. It seems too fancy to be true. But I have also tried this out. Not that I have always managed to be successful in trying this out. But then I can assure you that whenever I have tried this out, a lot of positive things have happened to me. Okay, so let us at least take very, very tiny baby steps, a few or at least one at a time, one a day or a few steps a day, and aim at making our thought process positive always, so that positive things will certainly happen to us. Okay? Yes, and as you know, your class 10 ICSE exams are very, very close, barely a couple of months away, and we here at Vedantu 9 and 10 YouTube channel are always here for your support, not just on YouTube, on our regular Vedantu platform. Also, we have a lot of courses that have been launched that are happening just to help you boost your confidence and make your preparation complete for your board exams. The micro courses are one among those, by which I mean, as long as you are the kind of student who knows your strong subjects and your weak subjects, and your strong topics and your weak topics, or your strong chapters and weak chapters, this is certainly your go-to place, okay? Because we have chapter-wise arrangement with all of these features: complete chapter discussions, key formulae and concepts, chapter summaries, revision, quizzes, assignments, tests, and a lot more. And this gives you that feel of a regular classroom. The only difference would be that we, the teachers, and you, the students, will not be sitting in the same room. That's just it. But trust me, you will not feel that difference once you try it out, okay? It's just like a normal class. The best part is it starts at a price as low as ₹11. All that you have to do is use the code AMMIC to avail this 95% off. And you can just go to the link for micro courses, which is given right there below in the description box. So do go and check it out for yourself, okay? And apart from this, we also have what is called the crash course for those of you who really wish to give that final touch to your studies, whatever you have studied across the year, right from the month of April, May or June of your class 10 ICSE. For ICSE 10th, we have a crash course for the subjects physics, chemistry, bio and math, which is basically your science and math subjects, because most of you have been asking for a crash course in these subjects mostly, okay? So the features are all that you can see here. You have live classes by some of the best teachers of Vedantu, who are undoubtedly some of the best across the country, and you have access to comprehensive tests, assignments, and also you can have doubt sessions with our academic mentors, with our teachers. You can have access to previous paper analysis and a lot more, okay? And again, these are the steps that you can follow by just clicking on the link that's given right there in the description box below, and you can use the code AMCC to avail a 50% off. Okay, roughly 50% off. You get the entire crash course for science and math for a very, very reasonable price of 7,999 only. Okay, so I would suggest please do make use of that. It's not very common that great quality content is available to you at a very affordable price, right? So do make use of that. And as you know, Vedantu's learning app has been awarded the User's Choice App Award 2019. So thank you for all the support so far. Do keep continuing to use the app because great content is getting updated on a frequent basis and on a regular basis. And yes, our Telegram group, just visit the link, which is again given in the description box below. Just hit the link, click on the link, join the group, and stay in touch with us regarding any of your academic concerns, any of your doubts. Okay? And most importantly, children, do hit the like button right now if you have been enjoying all the ICSE work that we have been doing, and do share it with all your friends, especially this video, because as I said, it is ICSE specimen paper discussion, right? So we had part 1 and part 2 already yesterday and the day before yesterday. Today will be part 3. I'm sure these 3 sessions will be very, very useful to all you ICSE 10th children out there across the country. So please don't forget to share it with your friends. And yes, do remember to subscribe to the channel Vedantu 9 and 10 if you have not done that yet, because not just teaching you concepts, we come up with complete packages of giving you motivation, giving you tips and tricks and cheat sheets and whatever possible based on our experiences as students ourselves and also based on our experience as teachers. Okay, so let us get started. You know that we are midway through section 2 of your specimen paper, which is totally for 40 marks, and among this you are expected to attempt any 4 out of 6 total questions. Okay, so out of those 6, we have already discussed 3 in yesterday's session. Question number 1, I mean the main question number 1 with a lot of sub questions were also worth 40 marks for section 1, which we discussed on Saturday, right, the day before yesterday. And yesterday we've discussed 3 from section 2, and the remaining 3 we shall be discussing in today's session. But yes, there was one question in section 1, okay, which was the session that I took on Saturday, which was a little confusing for many of you. Many of you have sent me emails and messages on Telegram asking me for a clarification on that question. So I thought it would make sense to start today's session with a re-explanation of that one. Okay, so this was basically a fill-in-the-blank question. It's a passage that's given to you, and you are expected to fill up the blanks using the terms that are given to you here in italics. So the question that most of you had in mind actually made a lot of sense, to be very, very honest. I also gave it a thought only after I heard the question from many of you, and it makes complete sense, okay, because I said water enters the root hair from the soil by the process of osmosis, and this is because, okay, let's take the answer slide. Now this was the explanation I gave you, and this was the answer slide that I showed you. Okay, so since we've already discussed this, let's have this slide open here. Now the question most of you had was this: why can't blank 1 have the answer as end osmosis and blank 5 have the answer as osmosis? Yes, absolutely makes sense. So in my personal opinion also, just like you, I would give full marks even if you had written 1 as end osmosis and 5 as osmosis. Okay, so in my personal opinion, whether you interchange 1 and 5 as it is right now, or whether you interchange between them, it doesn't matter, okay, because the meaning doesn't change, the concept doesn't change. It makes complete sense to write endosmosis here and osmosis here also, but everything else will absolutely be as it is in this. Okay, so I hope that does solve your doubt. So thank you very much for asking that question, children, because it also helped me think along those lines. It always helps to get such suggestions from the angle of children. So thanks a lot. Do stay in touch and come up with such questions in future also. Okay, and let's go ahead continuing, and this is question number 5 of the paper, which is part of section 2. Okay, so this again has 2 sub questions, A and B. A again has further 5 smaller questions, totally worth 5 marks. Okay, so here we've been given a diagram which represents an experiment to demonstrate a particular aspect of a specific physiological process in plants. Okay, so you are expected to study the diagram and answer the questions that follow. Okay, have a look at it. And the question is, what is the aim of the experiment? What do you see? It's a conical flask. There's a plant. One of the leaves is inside the conical flask. You can see a substance here at the bottom which is labeled as X, and there are 2 other leaves labeled B and C respectively, which are outside the conical flask. What do you think the experiment is trying to prove? That is what you're supposed to answer. Yes, the aim of this experiment is nothing but proving that carbon dioxide is necessary for photosynthesis. So basically the experiment, if you recall, I have actually discussed this very same question in the chapter photosynthesis in my session on frequently asked questions on photosynthesis. Okay, so in case you don't remember or have missed that session, please go back and have a look. But anyway, it's exactly the same one. Okay, so basically the experiment is trying to prove by creating a carbon dioxide free medium inside the flask and 2 other leaves B and C which are exposed to carbon dioxide, and hence they are able to photosynthesize, while this one is unable to photosynthesize because of lack of carbon dioxide. Okay, but how does it do it? Okay, by the end of this question discussion, I think you will get a better idea of that. But anyway, you have scored your 1 mark for this question by just writing the aim of the experiment. Okay, what is sub question number 2 or sub question number 2? What is a chemical substance named X in the diagram? And what is the special condition created inside the flask due to the presence of the substance X? What do you think X is? I told you already that we have added a substance X in order to create a carbon dioxide free medium inside the conical flask. And the substance is a very simple one, which is KOH, potassium hydroxide solution or potassium hydroxide. Okay, and what does it do? It basically absorbs carbon dioxide, and hence it ensures that there is no carbon dioxide available to the leaf that is inside the conical flask to carry out photosynthesis. So the other part of the question was, what is the special condition created inside the flask due to the presence of the substance X? So yes, the special condition is that it creates a carbon dioxide free medium inside the conical flask. Okay, so I hope that's simple enough to understand. Question number 3. In what way will the 3 leaves A, B and C differ at the end of the experiment when tested with iodine solution? Extremely simple. Again, if you just give it a little bit of thought, all of us know what iodine is used to test. What does it do? Yes, it is used to test for starch, right? When would you find starch in a leaf? You would find starch in a leaf only if photosynthesis has occurred in it, right? And that is why, for a comparison's sake, we have set up an apparatus such that 1 is unable to photosynthesize and 2 are able to photosynthesize. So what happens? What would the observation be? Yes, this is what you would see. Leaf A does not turn blue-black, which means it doesn't have starch, whereas leaves B and C do turn blue-black at the end of the experiment when tested with the iodine solution, because B and C have the presence of starch while A does not. Okay? Yes. Question number 4. Write the overall chemical equation for the process mentioned in 1. Okay, the process mentioned in 1. What is the process we mentioned in sub-question 1? Remember what the sub-question 1 was? What is the aim of the experiment? We said the aim is to prove that carbon dioxide is necessary for photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is the process we are talking about in the first sub-question, and because of that, our equation, our answer for this one becomes this. 6 molecules of carbon dioxide react with 12 molecules of water in the presence of light or sunlight, and chlorophyll gives you glucose, 6 molecules of oxygen and 6 molecules of water. This is what you would call a complete equation for photosynthesis. Whether or not it is balanced does matter a lot in giving you full marks. So balancing of the equation is something you have to take care of. Otherwise, yes, if you are the kind of person who memorizes, which I wouldn't strongly recommend, you will just have to remember where it is 6, where it is 1, where it is 12 and all that. And of course, another thing you can possibly miss out is writing sunlight and chlorophyll above and below the arrows. It doesn't matter where you write what, but because sunlight usually comes from the top, preferably it would be better to write light on top and chlorophyll below the arrow, okay? Because they both are also very important parts of photosynthesis, right? So those two have to be mentioned in the equation, okay? And the last sub question for this one, explain the term de-starching, okay? This is not directly related to the image that's given to you, but because it's related to the situation that we've been discussing until now, let us discuss what de-starching means. De-starching, what does it mean? Starch, you know what it is. So D would be removal of starch. So it's the process by which a plant is kept in the dark to get the starch from its leaves removed. Okay? So how would you remember what de-starching is? Removal of starch. In case you are the kind of person who gets confused with such a term, imagine what a decolorization does. Decolorization process or decolorizing is removal of colors. Deodorant is something that removes odor or removes smell. Deodorizing. Decolorizing, similarly de-starching, removal of starch. Okay, so that's about it. Answering all of these 5 sub questions fetches you 5 full marks. Okay, good news, because it is a very, very simple one. All you have to know is just the basics of photosynthesis and just have an understanding of why each raw material is important for photosynthesis. Okay, and of course, one new thing you may have to know in this particular question is that potassium hydroxide is the chemical that is used to get rid of the carbon dioxide in the medium. Okay, yes, let's go ahead. The next question, again, main question number 5, but sub part B of it. Briefly explain the following terms. You've been given a set of 5 different terms, so you can probably write just one line about each of them. The first one is plasmolysis or plasmolysis. Okay, how would you explain plasmolysis? Yes, remember this diagram? I've shown you this earlier also, wherein we had to discuss turgid and plasmolysed states. So how would you explain plasmolysis for a 1 mark question? It's basically the process by which cells lose water in a hypertonic solution. This is the situation we are talking about. A hypertonic or a highly concentrated solution. When you place a cell inside such a solution, the cell tends to lose out all the water from the inside, and as a result, what happens? All the cell contents would shrink away from the cell wall. The cell wall remains intact, but all the other living content inside the cell would shrink away from it because all the water is lost. So that is how you would describe plasmolysis in 1 line or for 1 mark. Next one, gestation. Yes, where have we discussed this? In human reproduction, right? But we discussed a lot of terms, pregnancy, implantation, gestation, parturition, menstruation, so many things. Among these, which one is gestation? Remember, I told you the animal with the longest gestation period is the elephant, which is roughly around 22 months, which is close to 2 years. It carries its baby inside its uterus. So yes, I have told you the answer already. Gestation is basically the period between conception or implantation till childbirth or parturition. So this is how you would define it, the time between conception and birth, or the time between implantation and parturition is what we call gestation. Just in case you would like to have a quick recap of this, that is why I have put these two images for you here. Yes. Now, if you can see this, yes, this is starting from ovulation. There is ovulation occurs. Now in this diagram, okay, this is not directly related to the definition, but just for you to understand, I'll explain it with this. Ovulation is the first step, and then of course fertilization has to occur, and then splitting, cleavage into the 2-cell stage, 4-cell stage, 8-cell stage, and all of that occurs. And finally, around day 8 to 9 after fertilization, implantation of the blastocyst occurs, as you can see here. Okay, so basically, yes, you have to remember the fact that from this stage, which is implantation of the blastocyst, okay, until the baby is ready for delivery, from here till here, because in between these two stages, all of these stages will have to happen. Of course, this is just a summary representing what majorly happens during gestation. But remember, implantation until parturition or childbirth is what we call gestation. Okay, very, very, very important term. Okay, and in the case of human beings, how long is it? It's roughly around 38 weeks. Right, so keep that also in mind. 9 months and a little more than that, roughly around 9.5 months. Okay, so let's go ahead. The next one to explain is synapse. Again, striking bells somewhere. Yes, it is part of the nervous system. But what exactly is the synapse? Remember, this is what the junction between two adjacent neurons would look like. Yes, just to make it simpler for you, let me draw a simpler image with a full neuron here. Now imagine this is one neuron with its cyton, its dendrites, and its axon terminals. Okay, it's trying to transmit its nerve impulses from itself to the next neuron, its neighboring neuron. Okay, so this is it. Its axon, its dendrites, its cyton, and its axon terminals. Okay, so this gap, okay, which is in between the two adjacent neurons is what we are referring to as synapse. The junction between two adjacent neurons. This is exactly it. Okay. Now it can be a junction between a neuron and the adjacent neuron, or in certain cases when it's the last neuron that is in series, it can also be the junction between the neuron and a muscle cell. Okay, now if that is the case, if this is what we are talking about, a junction between a neuron and a muscle cell, then we call this synapse as the neuromuscular junction. Okay, so but it's still a synapse, so how would you define it, which is our bigger task, and that is what is going to fetch us marks. Synapse, also called the neuronal junction, is basically the site of transmission of electrical nerve impulses between two neurons, between two nerve cells, or between a neuron and a gland or a muscle cell. Okay, I hope that is very clear to you. In case you still have a problem in understanding the basics of this concept, go back to our sessions, go back to our videos on nervous system where I've explained neuron in detail. Have a look at that, and then you will get a much better understanding of the concept. Okay, so this is the next 1 mark question. Now coming to the next one, photophosphorylation. Okay, now most of you would perhaps recall that this is something that's associated with photosynthesis, right? But is it synonymous to photosynthesis? No, not exactly, right? Not even exactly. It's nowhere close to being synonymous to photosynthesis. Of course, it occurs as a part of photosynthesis, but it's not the complete process we are talking about. What is phosphorylation? Phosphorylation basically means the process of formation of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, is phosphorylation. Now, when this process of ATP formation from ADP, like you can see here, happens in the presence of sunlight, as in the case of light-dependent phase of photosynthesis, you call it photophosphorylation. Okay, so it's basically the process by which ADP is converted to ATP using light energy. Okay, as simple as that. Photophosphorylation. Phosphorylation is formation of ATP from ADP, and photo is light. Okay, yes. The next one, Lamarck's theory of use and disuse of organs. How would you explain that? Yes, remember the giraffe example? We have discussed this, right? So what did Lamarck propose about this based on the giraffe's example? According to Lamarck, more an organism uses a particular body part or an organ, better it would develop into. And the more an organism keeps a body part idle, it would be inherited as an idle organ by its offspring also. So according to Lamarck, giraffes were initially short-necked animals like you see in the first picture. Right? We've explained this all in the chapter evolution in the part of Lamarckism, and when there was a time of food scarcity for these short-necked animals on the ground, they tried stretching their necks to reach out to leaves that were on treetops. So they just kept on and on and on doing this. Some giraffes kept on striving to stretch their necks, and they ended up developing a longer neck because of prolonged use of the neck. Whereas those giraffes which did not use it much, that is what we mean by disuse, they just remained as short-necked giraffes, and again respectively their offspring also inherited whatever their parents had. Those giraffes who had disused or less used their necks continue to have short-necked offspring, whereas those that continue to work harder by stretching their necks more and more continue to have longer necked giraffes. And eventually, obviously because of conditions, these vanished or ceased to exist because of lack of food on the ground level, while these had a survival advantage and hence survived. Yes, Darwin has given a much better explanation of this, and today we know that the theory of use and disuse cannot really be accepted. But anyway, because the question is that we have to write it as a few points this way. Okay, this is just there for your reference. According to Lamarck, selective use and disuse of organs can help organisms gain or lose traits. He further believed that those acquired characters, whether it is a long-necked character that's acquired or a same or short-necked character that's already there, okay, could be inherited by the offspring, and this changes the species over time. Okay, if you write this much, it will fetch you 1 full mark for this question. So our next question is this: what is the significance of the part labeled 5? Remember, we labeled part 5 as the scrotum. Why is it there? Now, scrotum is basically a sac-like structure which is away from the rest of the abdominal cavity, rest of the body cavity of the male. And why is it there? It's there so that the testes can be present in it in order to create an ideal temperature for the maturation of sperm. So how would you write the answer to that? Yes, this is how you can write the answer in a sentence. The testes descend into 5, which is scrotum, which provides a temperature that is 2 to 3 degrees Celsius less than normal body temperature in order to facilitate sperm maturation. Okay, so that is the significance of the scrotum. Now, one more. Mention the hormone secreted by the part labeled 1. Now, part labeled 1 is the testis. What does it secrete? Exactly, the testosterone, right? As simple as that. That fetches you 1 full mark. Wow. Now, draw a neat label diagram of a human sperm. Okay? That's a very, very simple diagram, right? CBSE students normally get a lot of more complex diagrams to draw. Fortunately, you guys are lucky that way. A very simple diagram, you can use this as reference, but these are the parts that you have to label if you're asked to draw the human sperm. Okay, you have to mark the head, middle piece and the tail. In the head you have to mark the nucleus and the acrosome, which is the tip, the cap-like tip. And then of course there is the mitochondrion inside the middle piece, and then plasma membrane, not necessarily, but you can label it, but the rest of it is very, very important. And this is the tail or the flagellum. Okay, so that makes it a complete diagram of okay, this E is not visible completely on screen. There has to be an E also here, ACROSOME. Okay, sorry children about that. So please make a note of the spellings correctly. All the labelings have to be neatly marked. All right, and with that we go to the next question. Give scientific reasons for the following statements. Okay. First one, the fetus cannot develop without the placenta. Of course, we've discussed this before. What is the importance of the placenta? Yes, the placenta allows for diffusion of substances from the mother to the fetus and back from the fetus to the mother. Useful substances such as oxygen and nutrients go in from the mother to the fetus through the placenta, and from the fetus to the mother, what goes? Whatever it doesn't need, right? Whatever the baby doesn't need, like carbon dioxide and other metabolic wastes, diffuse through the placenta from the baby to the mother. Okay, so this is just there for your reference. You just have to write this much. All right, the next question. Throat infections can lead to ear infections. Of course, I can very well relate to that now, especially because I have been having a severe respiratory related issue for quite some time now. But anyway, let's look at why that happens. Yes, this is a structure of the ear, and if you can see, there is a structure called the eustachian tube, right? Yes, the eustachian tube is basically a link between the middle ear to the nasopharynx, which consists of the upper throat and the back of the nasal cavity. Okay, nasopharynx connects the middle ear to the nasopharynx. What exactly is the nasopharynx? The upper throat and the back of the nasal cavity. That is what nasopharynx is. So because of this, infections in the throat can also spread to the ears. Remember this term, children, eustachian tube or the eustachian canal. And that is why otolaryngologists specialize in all these three together: ear, nose, throat. We call them ENT specialists, right? Okay, and let's go ahead. The next one. We feel blinded for a short while entering a dark room when coming from bright light. Yes, very interesting, right? You must have learned a little bit of this in physics also, in your lower grades or in grade 10. I'm not sure. You must be knowing why this occurs. Why do you think so? It is actually because of a pigment called rhodopsin. The pigment rhodopsin, which makes up the rod cells of your eye. There are rod cells and cone cells in your eyes, right? Cones basically help in color vision, and that means they are more active in bright light. Rods do not help in color vision. They get activated in dim light. Okay, so rhodopsin, which is a pigment of the rod cells of the eye, get broken down, or we call that process photo bleaching. They get photo bleached when you come to bright light, when your eyes are exposed to bright light. Okay, so because this proteinaceous pigment rhodopsin breaks down in bright light, suddenly when you come to dim light, there is this transition period, right? That adaptation has to happen. In the dim room, in the dark room, your cone cells may not help much. So now, because rhodopsin has been broken down in the bright light, it may take some time for it to get increased for the levels of rhodopsin to get increased in dim light. Okay, but that does happen, but that will take a little bit of time, a few seconds probably. And because of that, gradually, when the rhodopsin levels increase, your rod cells are enabled to be sensitive to dim light, and then of course you can see what is happening in the dim light. This also happens when you get into the cinema hall, right? When you suddenly enter from the bright outside rooms, the lounge area of the cinema theater into the cinema hall, suddenly you may feel like, oh my goodness, I can't find my seat. But within a few seconds, you will be able to see. That's why you see people walking around with mobile torches and all that as soon as they enter inside a cinema hall. Okay, so this is how you can explain this. Okay, and now, urine is slightly thicker in summer than in winter. Why do you think so? Again, very, very simple. If you just give it some logical thought, during summer, you tend to perspire a lot, you tend to sweat a lot, and because of that, there is a lot of water loss by other means and not just by kidney excretion, right? And because of that, since a considerable amount of water is lost from the body as perspiration during summer, urine ends up becoming slightly thicker than in the winter months. Okay? And now, the last give reason question, loss of nucleus and mitochondria make erythrocytes more efficient in their function. Okay. Now, this probably is news to some of you. You know what erythrocytes are, right? They are your red blood cells. Look at how beautifully they are shaped, something like red donuts, right? Of course, they are not hollow completely in the middle, but they are flattened. They are biconcave in shape. Now, the reason they don't have a nucleus, we have discussed this, is so that space can be maximized to carry around more oxygen. In order to make more space for oxygen, they get enucleated, or they get rid of their nucleus while they get matured, the RBCs. Okay, that is the very first point. But what about mitochondria? Does that also have the same reason? No, it has in fact a better reason, not just space saving. Yes, the absence of mitochondria ensures that RBCs cannot use the oxygen for themselves. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Remember what we discussed in lower grades in respiration. Mitochondria helps a lot in cellular respiration, right? So just to ensure RBC doesn't carry out such processes within itself, so what would happen if mitochondria were there? All the oxygen that its hemoglobin is accommodating, accumulating, may undergo the further processes of cellular respiration in the RBC itself. So by the time it reaches its target tissues, there is nothing to give them. So just to make sure it doesn't use it for itself, the RBC is a very, very dedicated person, a very, very dedicated cell of our body. It has to perform its job completely, optimally, and with utmost sincerity. So because of that, it has ensured that it doesn't have a nucleus and it doesn't have a mitochondria. Okay, it doesn't have mitochondria. Okay, now perhaps for those of you who thought the second point is news for you, just one important new piece of information, you might have the question, okay, so if there are no mitochondria, how does the RBC meet its energy needs? Where does it get its energy from? Well, remember the first phase of cellular respiration? Yes, it's called glycolysis, which occurs in the cytoplasm. Through glycolysis and fermentation itself, RBC can meet all its energy requirements, okay? Rest of it is not required. And that will be your answer to this question. Okay, and finally coming to the very, very last question of your specimen paper, question number 7. Of course, we have a lot of sub-questions under this, okay? So stay with me until the end, till we finish that. Mention, okay, a homozygous purple flower variety of pea plant is crossed with white flower variety of pea. Answer the questions that follow. Mention the phenotype and genotype of the F1 generation of the offspring, okay, based on genetics, based on heredity. This is your question. Now, how do we solve this? A purple flower variety of pea plant. The genotype has been given to you as capital P, capital P. You're crossing it with a white variety of pea plant, which is represented as small p, small p. Obviously, because it's homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive, this is the parent generation. All the F1 generations would be heterozygous, capital P, small p. So how would you mention the phenotype? Phenotype or the physical expression would it be purple flowered or would it be white flowered? Because it has one dominant allele at least, all of them would be purple flowered, right? So the phenotype would be purple. And the genotype would be what you have written here, capital P, small p, heterozygous genotype and purple phenotype. Okay, so that becomes the answer to your first question. Now, next one. If the offspring of the F1 generation are crossed, what would be the phenotypic and genotypic ratios of the F2 generation? Okay, again, I've rewritten the question here. Let's look at what happens. F1, we have seen that all of them were heterozygous, right? Capital P, small p. If you cross them amongst themselves, which means now basically your parents are two heterozygous purple plants. Okay? You're supposed to find out F2. So what are the gametes? Let's work it out through a Punnett square. The gametes of one parent is capital P, small p. The other parent also, the gametes are capital P, small p. What are the combinations? Capital P, capital P, capital P, small p. Again a capital P, small p and a small p, small p. Okay? What does it tell you about the answer? What does it tell you about F2? So in F2, you can see that phenotypically, how many of them are purple? When there is at least one capital P, they are all phenotypically purple. So 3 purple is to 1 white. This doesn't have a capital P allele, so this is 1 white. This would be the phenotypic ratio. Okay? What about the genotypic ratio? The genotypic ratio, let's calculate that. 1 capital P is to 2 capital P small p, which is 2 heterozygous, to 1 double recessive homozygous. Yes, this would be your genotypic F2 ratio. 3:1 for the phenotype, 1:2:1 for the genotype. Okay? Once again, detailed explanations have been done in the respective chapter. Go back to that, go back to those videos and have a look if you haven't attended those sessions or if you have lost touch with those. Okay? Now, what is the next question? State Mendel's law of dominance. This is not directly related to this case. So, how would you state it? Yes. You remember this. There's just one example that's there. You can just state it like this: in a cross of parents that are pure for contrasting traits, like the example that was given to us. Okay? 2 homozygous parents are what we are talking about. Only one form of the trait will appear in the next generation. As you can see, only one is appearing in the next generation. Offspring that are hybrid for a trait, by which we mean heterozygous, will have only the dominant trait in the phenotype. Okay, capital P, small p was also purple, right? That is what the second point says. This is what Mendel's law of dominance states. Okay, and now, what is the scientific name of pea plants? Very, very, very simple, right? It is Pisum sativum. Of course, remember to underline Pisum sativum separately because it's a scientific name. Okay, now, name 2 genetic diseases in humans. You can mention any: hemophilia, color blindness, sickle cell anemia, phenylketonuria, thalassemia, anything, any 2 that comes to your mind, any 2 out of these or anything else that comes to your mind, genetic diseases in humans. So answering this fetches you full 5 marks. Okay, now we have another sub question which is answering the following briefly. The very first one says, write 2 features of Neanderthal man. Neanderthal man, if you remember, Homo neanderthalensis is the direct predecessor of Homo sapiens as we know it until now. Yes, this is what he somewhat looked like. I have mentioned a few points out there. You can pick up any 2 and write it. Okay, these were the basic features. They had a larger brain compared to Homo sapiens. Okay, that is one very important feature that you have to remember. Roughly around 1500 cc, whereas today Homo sapiens have roughly around 1300 to 1400 max cranial capacity. Okay, and they were relatively more muscular and heavier, and all of these features, language ability, cultural and social behavior, all of these were features of Neanderthal man. Okay, now next one, what are the age restrictions for marriage by law for boys and girls in India? You must be knowing this, of course. You are teenagers. You would certainly be smart enough to know this. For boys in India, the marriageable age legally is 21 years, while for girls it is 18 years. Okay. Yes, state 2 objectives of Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. Okay, what would you write? Yes, Swachh Bharat, right? That was a time when the entire country was on a cleaning spree. You can write any of them, such as one of the objectives was to clean the roads, streets, cities, towns and villages across the country, and to eliminate open defecation through the construction of community toilets and individual toilets. Okay, these are just a couple of them. If anything else comes to your mind, you are free to write that also. Now, mention 2 functions of the amniotic fluid. Back to human reproduction. Yes, amniotic fluid. This fluid that you see here is the amniotic fluid. This one, within which the fetus is lying bathed. Okay, what does it do? Of course, it has a lot of functions, some of which are to protect the embryo from mechanical shocks, to maintain an even pressure around the embryo, and to allow restricted movements for the embryo. Okay, all of these are features of this. Okay, and you can write any 2 among these 3 features. Okay, now next one. Okay, so the next one is mention 2 functions of amniotic fluid. Again, back to human reproduction. Now, if you recall this image, this situation, this is the amniotic fluid, right? The fluid within which the fetus lies bathed, within which it can move around. What is its function? Of course, it is to help to protect the embryo from physical shock, to maintain an even pressure around the embryo, and also to allow the fetus to carry out a few restricted movements. Okay, that is why the amniotic fluid is there, but you are just expected to write any 2 of these functions. Okay, now next question. List 2 reasons for population explosion in India. Of course, so many that you can think of, but I have just listed out 3 here for you. You can write any of them or any others also that comes to your mind. Traditional or superstitious beliefs, desire for a male child, lack of education or awareness are all some of the features that have led to population explosion in the country India. Okay, and with that we come to the end of the ICSE Biology 2020 specimen paper discussion. I would love to hear from you children, either through email or please put your feedback in the comment section below. And do not forget to hit the like button right now if you found all these 3 sessions together very useful for you. Let's hope to create a lot more useful content in the days to come. So I wouldn't know what you exactly need unless you all keep communicating with me actively, right? So until now I have been hearing from a lot of you. So do keep that communication channel open. My email ID is right here, or the comment section. I always read all the comments that come up at the end of every single session, and please share it with all your ICSE Class 10 friends, children. Everyone will certainly find it useful, and do remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done yet. And until we meet again in another amazing session, this is Ambika signing off. Bye bye.